class 11 students, welcome to the online tutorials. Today we will learn a poem titled The Slave's Dream from the poetry section of your textbook. A poem or a poem written by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Before we start the tutorials, the sound of this video might not be of premium quality owing to not so good recording gadgets. I apologize for that, but I believe you can hear it if you put up the volume. Okay, anyway, we will go ahead with learning. You will see the title of the poem here, The Slave's Dream. You can see his picture of a picture of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Something about the poet is listed here. We will go through it. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow was born in February 27, 1807, and he passed away, died in March 24th, 1882. Longfellow was born in Portland, place named Mayan, when it was still under the states of Massachusetts in the United States of America. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow was an American poet, an educator. He was also a traveler, a linguist. People or persons who study linguistics, and a romantic. Romantic from the word romanticism. Okay, romanticism is simply a movement. Romanticism is a movement in the arts and literature which originated in the late part of the 18th century, emphasizing greatly on the inspiration, subjectivity, and the primacy of the individual. We have romantic poetry. He was a writer. Romantic means writer of romantic poetry. Romantic poetry, uh, poems or a poetry of imagination, sentiments, and emotion. So he was one writer of romantic poetry. He was well versed with the traditions of European literature and thoughts. Uh, Longfellow, he studied at Bowdoin College and became a professor at the same college, and later at Harvard College. His first major poetry collections were Voices of the Nights, that was out in 1839, and ballads and other poems, which was published in 1841. Longfellow also wrote many lake poems known for their musicality and often presenting stories of mythology and legend. In fact, Longfellow was the first American poet who was acclaimed internationally, both nationally and internationally. He became the most popular American poet of his day, and also had success overseas as well. So these are some of the few things about the poet. Okay, moving on, we will have a brief introduction of what we are going to learn. A brief introduction of the poem. The poem, The Slaves or A Slave's Dream. The poem discusses the true nature of slavery and freedom through its content. The poem discusses how it's like to be a slave and how it feels to be freedom or at liberty. It will be clearly depicted by the contents of the poetry. Uh, an anti-slavery poem. It is one of the anti-slavery poems in the collection of in the collection Poems on Slavery. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow has a collection of poems on slavery. This is the eighth poem from the collection that was published in December 1942. Now, in this poem, several literary devices are used. Literary devices. Uh, these are devices used by writers or poets uh, to convey more artistically, or to convey more beautifully, to convey more forcefully what they write about in the poem or in their writings. there are several literary devices used in this in this poem. If you look at the poem, okay, if you look at the poem in the first line, the vowel sound I, okay, e, rise, besides, in the words like besides, rise, okay, are examples of assonance. This is assonance is a literary device. Okay, in the first line you will see, like I mentioned, in the words besides, rise, besides, rise. These are examples of assonance. Assonance, my dear students, is when a line of poetry contains repetition of vowel sounds. Okay, so I, vowel sounds, we have a repetition of it in the first line itself. Besides the ungathered rice he lay. This is an examples of this is an example of assonance. In the second line, if you check in the second line of the poetry, I have got it here. His sickle in his hand. This line shows alliteration. Alliteration, my dear students, another literary device that is used in this poem. Very briefly, alliteration is the repetition of a consonant sounds in the line of poetry. Assonance, a repetition of vowel sounds. Alliteration, repetition of consonant sounds in the line of poetry. Here the H sound, h, okay, sounds is repeated in the words like his, okay, his and hen. These sounds are repeated. If you check the second line of the poetry, his sickle in his hand, okay, his and hand. Another device that is used, literary device that is used, is simile. This you might have heard from your lower classes. Very quickly, comparison between two things using the words like or as. Now simile is also used in this poem, okay, in the line before him, like a blood red flag. So this is an example of simile. Moving on, we also have examples of personification. The poet also uses personification. This, you know, my dear students. Personification is where a non-living or non-human things is given human attributes, human characters. Okay, example from the line, and the hyena scream. This line is an example of personification. Okay, hyena doesn't scream, humans scream, but the hyena, a non-human being, an animal, is given an attribute, a character of human being screaming. Okay, so these are some of the literary devices used in the poem. Now, coming to the poem itself, the slave's dream is about a series of dreams of a former African king who is now a victim of slavery during the 19th century. Okay, the poem talks about the dreams of a former African king who was captured and brought to America to work as a forced labor during the slavery period in America in the 19th century. Okay, the poem portrays the lost freedom and dreams of a slave. This poem will greatly talk about the lost freedom of the individual, the African king, and the dreams he is going through as a slave. Okay, the slave lay dying in a rice field and dreams of the image of his family and native land, that is his kingdom, as he is greatly worked and tortured, forced labor. Okay, working with little or no food and rest. He is exhausted. That's why he lay dying in a rice field. As he lay dying in a rice field, he dreams of his family, of his native land. Okay, his dream about his native land where he was once the king. He dreams, repetition, a dream about his native land where he was once the king, a majestic king. That is before the pre-slavery in African nation. In that native land where he is the king, the majestic river Niger flowed. Okay, river Niger. uh, name of a river in Western Africa. He is in his dream. He is embraced by his queen and children. A dream, a scene which brought tears to his eyes as he lay subconscious in the rice field. And then he embarks on a journey across his land. Okay, in his dream, he embarks on a journey across his land, riding majestically over his royal stallion horse, crossing mountains and valleys and ocean and the distant settlement. Now, as he rides across his kingdom, he is greeted by many voices of nature, of the wild nature. They all symbolize freedom. Okay, these voices of nature, free spirited freedom, and that is what he longs for. Then back into reality. The slave is now back into reality uh, when the master riding on a horse beats him with a whip. Okay, but he no longer feels the crack of the whip on his back, nor the tormenting heat of the sun that has overawed his dreams, illuminating his land of sheep, which means that has overcome him. Okay, he is now on the verge of dying. Darkness overcomes, and the slave attains his freedom only in his death. As he lay dying on the rice field, he could no longer feel the beating of his master, okay, nor feel the heat of the sun. His land of sleep is illuminated by death. That means darkness is overcome. He attains his freedom only in his death. This is an irony. Okay, a very sad ending for, as well as a happy ending for the poem as well as for the slave. Only in his death he could attain his freedom. His soul is set free, although his body remains slave in the rice field. Now, this is a very brief introduction of the poem, so that later on when we discuss the the poem in detailed, okay, per stanza wise, you will know what we are discussing. I hope this is clear enough. Now we will move to the poem itself. Okay, see on the screen you can see. I hope this is clear. On the screen you can see the poem discussed in stanza wise. The first stanza introduces the tortured and the mistreated slave as he lay dying in the rice field. The physical image is portrayed in the first stanza. Okay, oh, that is, he is overworked and exhausted. The phrases ungathered rice and sickle in his hand indicates his work is unfinished due to exhaustion and immense fatigue. He is presented with his bare breast lying on the field. This represents barrenness of his life, slave life, the emptiness of his slave life. In reality, he is lying on the ground without clothes. That is bare breast. His matted hair, thick hair, buried in the sand, indicates that slowly creeping over his exhausted body. Now, the physical image is portrayed in the first stanza, like I said, and uh, bare breast without clothes and his thick hair. These two things represent different things. The bare breast represents the barrenness of his slave life. The matted hair or the thick hair that is buried in the sand. This indicates how death is slowly taking over his exhausted body. Okay. Now, as he sleeps, he sees in his dream his native land. Okay, that is his dreams. He sees his native land where he was once a king. Okay, that is the first stanza of the poem. Now, moving on to the second stanza. I'm sorry. Here you have it, the second stanza of the poem. The dream continues in the second stanza, where it is described more vividly. Okay, in more detailed manner. The dream is explained by the poet in the second stanza. The slave's native country is presented like a paradise. Okay, it is represented like a paradise, uh, where the lordly Niger flowed in his native land. The river Niger flowed beneath the palm trees. Once again, walk as a king. Now, in the plains beneath the palm trees, okay, he once again walked like a king. In his sleep, that is in his dream, once again he relived the days of his freedom, almost hearing the tinkling caravan coming down the mountain road. Now, in his dream, he once again relives the majestic days that he lived with freedom and liberty. He could almost hear, in his dreams, he could almost hear the tinkling caravan coming down the mountain road in his native land. Caravan. Caravan, my dear students, is a convey or a procession of travelers. Okay, a convey or a procession of travelers that includes their vehicle and the cargo or any pack of animals, especially, you know, camels and goats and horses crossing the desert, or simply uh, put it, a convey or a procession of travelers, that is the caravan, that he could see people crossing and coming down the mountain road in his dream. That is the second stanza. Now, these dreams in the second stanza, okay, this dream life is the opposite end to what he is really experiencing. What he is really experiencing is a chained, bonded slave in the rice field. In the other opposite end, that is in his dream, he is a king, okay, who is free, who is free in his native land, walking about in his beautiful native land where the river Niger flowed. You know, he is walking, taking a stroll beneath the beautiful palm trees. So this is an opposite end to what he is really experiencing. Now this will give the reader an insight what his freedom life was like before slavery. Okay? This gives a brief glimpse of his life before slavery. Coming to the third stanza. The third stanza talks about his family. Now the focus shifts from uh, his physicality to his land to his family. In Wordsworth Longfellow presents a picture of his family in the third stanza. The wife is described as a dark-eyed queen standing among their children. Okay, his wife, who is described as a queen, standing among his children, waiting for him, okay, to come home, and they are greatly missing him. He dreams how they embrace him, kiss his cheeks, hold his hand in emotional bonding. That is what he saw in his dream. The queen and the children, out of love, embracing him, kissing him on his cheeks, and holding his hand in a strong emotional bonding as a family. This emotion was so strong that he cries in his sleeps. In his sleep, he could feel the emotion, and it was so intense that he cries in his sleep as he lay dying in the rice field. Teardrops onto the sand. Now, the importance of his family is emphasized. Okay, how much he valued his family is shown. Uh, the importance of the family, the emotion is so strong that even a strong man like himself is moved to tears. A strong man who is brought all the way from Africa to work in the rice field in America, who has withstand this torturous labor, okay, and now exhausted, lying subconscious in the rice field, is moved to tears. This stanza greatly emphasizes the value of his family. Now, moving on to the fourth stanza. In the fourth stanza, he perceives his life as a freeman. In the fourth stanza, he embarks on a journey across his land. Okay, as a freeman. In the fourth stanza, he sees himself as a freeman riding a horse at a very great speed. Okay, at the banks of the river Niger. Now he is riding like the king. So his bridle reins were golden chains, Since he is a king, the reins, the bridle reins, the rope that is used for controlling the horses were of golden chains, made of golden chains. Okay, and like a warrior, as he leaps forward, with each leap he could feel the steel cover, that is the scabbard, of his sword hitting his stallion's flank, the side of his horse. Uh, in the fifth stanza, the journey, the riding continues. Okay, in the fifth stanza is in fact a continuation of the fourth stanza. As he rides forward, across his native land, he sees himself, he pictures himself following the flight of the flamingos, birds, you know it, from morning till night. Okay, he rides across his land from morning till night. This also indicates, this also signals, okay, how free spirited he was, and how free and freedom he had, riding across the land day and night any without any obstruction or without any inhabitations. Okay, from morning till night over the plains where the tamarind grew. He followed the flight of the flamingos over the plains where the tamarind grew. Now his right takes him till the far edge of the countryside, where he could see the Kafri huts, a settlement uh, of the Kafirs, and then the ocean came to view in his subconsciousness. Okay, now this shows that he has gone too far. He has gone too far in his native land, that he could actually see the Kafri hut. Kafri is or originally the Kafirs, but now it is considered offensive. So we don't we no longer use the term Kafirs. It is now termed as Kafri. The Kafri hut. Kafri are a race that is inhabiting Kafristan in Central Asia. Okay, now this will show that he has gone across vast swaths of land, that he could actually see the settlement of the Kafri, and the ocean also came to view in his subconsciousness. In the sixth stanza, in the sixth stanza, you can see on the screen, he enters into night as he rides along. Okay, he enters. Now night has fallen. Night has fallen. He could hear the lions roar, the hyenas scream, and he could picture himself crushing the reeds. Reeds means tall grasses that grows near the water body. Uh, Listening to the river horse making sounds like a glorious roll of drum as it passes. Okay, these are the scenes that he could see at night, things he could hear at night: the lions roar, the hyenas scream, and he could picture himself as he rides along, crushing the grasses, listening to the river horses as they make a sound like a glorious roll of drum as it passes. All He achieves all this. All this could be achieved through the dreams, through the dreams, which is triumphant. Okay, as it gives him freedom and happiness. All this was possible only in his dreams. Now that he is a bonded slave, all this is achieved through his dreams. Again, which is triumphant. Why? Because it gives him freedom and happiness. Now coming to the last stanza. Okay, the in the I'm sorry, the second last stanza. In the seventh stanza. So wait. In the seventh stanza, the forest with its many sounds, shouts of liberty. If you witness a forest, if you go to forest, you will hear many sounds of various insects and animals. Okay, it seems the they are shouting for liberty. It's shouts of liberty. The stanza portrays the forest of his mind. Now this stanza also portrays the forest of his mind, shouting out it shout out his soul's desire, that is liberty. The forest of his mind shouting out his desire, his soul's desire, that is for freedom and liberty. Now, even the turbulent blast of the desert, it sounded so wild and free that he moved and smiled in his sleep at their immense joy. Okay, so in the final stanza, in the final stanza, in the final stanza, the poet reflects back on his physical condition. Okay, the physical condition of the slave is presented again. He lies numb and senseless in his death. That's why when um, the driver, the master, came around, okay, whipping it with his whip, he could not feel the driver's whip, nor he could feel the burning heat of the day. There's the hot sun that has overcome the land of the sleep, that has overcome his dream, that has overtaken his dream, and now through his death, the soul has broken the chains of his body and attained freedom. Only in his death he could free himself from this bonded slavery. Okay, only in his death he could attain freedom. So that is a brief explanation of the poem. My dear students, please go through the tutorials again and again. Go slow. In fact, this entire tutorial is presented to you point wise. If you see, so you can also read and understand by yourself. My dear students, let me remind you for the first time that the sentences you see here are not actually sentences. Okay, this is not a fully constructed sentences. These are the mood points. These are the main points uh, that is presented. You can see the points. Read the poem. Very necessary reading the poem from your textbook and understand the poem. So each stanza, the 8 stanzas are presented point wise here. Go through it, listen to the video tutorials, watch it, read your textbook. It should not be difficult for you to understand. Anyways, if you still have some problems regarding the understanding of the chapters, the poems, or any other chapter, please get in touch with us. We will get back to you. Regarding the notes, regarding the question and answers that is uh, given in your textbook, pages 42 and 43. Okay, there are some question and answers that is listed there. You don't have to worry. Notes will be provided to you separately very soon. Uh, so you don't have to worry. In fact, let me advise you, don't rely on the notes that is presented to you by somebody else, right? Once if you have gone through the chapters, if you have read the chapters, okay, in fact it is highly recommended that you attempt the notes on your own. Only when you have a difficulty, if there's no way you can answer the questions on your own, then you can consult teachers or somebody else who can consult us. First you attempt it on your own. We will also give it to you. uh, in the meanwhile, keep learning the lessons. I will get back to you very soon with another tutorials. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this chapter. Thank you.